All right, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about healthcare, I mean healthcare in general, but there is a very large myth in Alberta amongst the left-wing community specifically, and this is pretty much one of the only things they talk about, that and, Jason Kenney and all his corporate corruption. Now, to throw a caveat out there to start, I'm not a huge fan of the Kenney government. I have definitely my fair share of criticisms for them, but this is not one of them, or at the very least, it is one of them, but for the opposite reason that the NDP people would suggest. Now, what is this myth that they talk about? Well, they constantly talk about, oh, cuts to healthcare, and oh, it's the worst thing in the world, and they're destroying healthcare. And what is the reality? The reality is that they're not cutting healthcare spending. From what I've seen, they're only cutting the rate at which we increase spending on healthcare, right? So that's very different than actually cutting healthcare. And I mean, as far as the CBC article goes, and they say how Alberta went from being one of the lowest spending provinces on healthcare to one of the highest. And they start by saying the problem, according to the report's authors, is a six-person panel led by former Saskatchewan Finance Minister Janice McKinnon. Is government spending at the top of the things that they say the government is spending too much on is healthcare. This report will guide the UCP government when it introduces its first budget next month, and the financial plan is widely expected to be one of the spending restraint after years of relative excess. Again, so this is something that they point out too. After years of relative excess. So what does that mean? What that means is that we've been spending more on healthcare than we can physically afford to spend, right? We've been spending more than we can physically afford to spend. Now, the left wing people would shoot back and say, oh, if we just tax the rich more, right? Well, that's not realistic, right? And this is something I've been over a million times, but yet there's still a lot of these idiots that still believe this, is that when you raise taxes, it doesn't guarantee more revenue, right? In fact, a lot of times you lose revenue, right? Take New York and California, for example. Because they have such high taxes on the rich, many rich people are leaving the states. Thus, they have nothing. And this is something that I don't understand how these people can't get through their thick skulls, is that they genuinely believe if you just keep raising taxes on people, that they're never going to reconsider where they're going to live. Like these people genuinely believe that if you literally um, raise marginal taxes to like 90-95%, that no rich people would leave, that they would do nothing to try and get around those taxes. Like, this is how ignorant these people are. Like, and I don't understand how you can be that ignorant. Like, seriously, how can you be that ignorant? There is plenty of examples that contradict their worldview, like California, New York, perfect examples of that. And again, when you just think about it from a logical perspective, like, how have these people never thought to themselves, hey, if I was in these person's shoes, what would I think? If I was making $1 million a year and 80% of that was taxed, 90% of that was taxed, do you think I would be likely to move away? Well, of course you would. So, this idea that you can just raise taxes and it's not going to have unwanted negative effects is absolutely insane. Now, the other thing they bring up as well is, oh, if we just tax the corporations more, right? But that's the exact same thing as the individuals, because when you tax corporations more, they may just move up, move their head offices. I mean, you look at California or New York again. Tesla's moving, and not to mention, look at all these other big businesses that are moving. Look at how many companies have moved out of Alberta over the last 5 years because of the Liberal government and the NDP government. Look at all that, right? Again, it's just such basic psychology that if you're a company, if you're a corporation, um, if you're an individual, and you can pay less taxes simply by moving, most people are going to do that, right? And here's the thing, even if it's a little bit of a difference, eventually there comes a point to where it's like, hey, yeah, I know my family lives here, I know I have friends here, but I can't take this anymore. An extra 20% of my income, an extra 10% of my income, that's quite a bit of money. And here's the other thing too that they always bring up, is that whenever they talk about, oh, we could just pay for all this stuff if we just tax the rich more and the big evil corporations more, they mean that, but they also don't tell you that when they do that, it hurts the everyday person as well. When you tax the rich more, when you tax corporations more, a lot of that money that they, if you otherwise wouldn't have taxed it, ends up in the hands of everyday people, right? It ends up in the hands of everyday people. Some of it doesn't, yeah, but a lot of it does. And I mean, there's basic ways of knowing it. Number one, if you're a rich person and you get tax money versus if you don't get tax money, maybe they go buy another car, maybe they buy a second house, right? Maybe they remodel their house, they buy a car for their kid. Again, so that provides jobs, right? So again, more money for the everyday person. If you tax a corporation more, well, I mean, one of two things, I mean, both of these things will happen. Number one, if it's a big corporation, the people that have stake in said corporation, that's money out of their pocket because the value of a company's stock is the projected earnings after taxes and expenses down the road, right? Because when you buy stock of a company, you're trying to figure out how much money is this company going to be worth down the road, right? And if you buy it, you're assuming it's going to go up. If you sell it, you're assuming it's going to go down, right? So this is the problem that these people think, oh, if you just tax the big evil corporations, it doesn't affect the average person. Well, of course it does. Of course it does, right? And when you tax the big evil corporations and they leave, well, guess what? Everyday people work for those corporations, and when they leave, they are out of a job, right? So this is the thing I really can't stand about these people is that they're either so ignorant that they've never done any research whatsoever that contradicts their worldview, like literally ever, or the goal is just to push socialism and they don't care how much it affects other people. And I think it's very obvious that that is the case, right? Because even though I think a lot of these people genuinely have never done research, on for opposing views, I believe there's a lot of people that are in that case, that are in that boat. I don't think that they're so ignorant to genuinely believe that if you just keep raising taxes over and over and over and over again, that the people that are getting their taxes raised are just going to sit there and take it. Like, I don't see how you can possibly be that ignorant. So, again, the thing to bring up here is that they are not cutting spending. They're simply cutting the rate at which we increase spending. And it is not because they hate the poor or any garbage that the left likes to bring up. It's because we don't have the money, right? We already spend over $20 billion a year on healthcare. And I think we only, um, after expenses, as far as at least as far as the provincial government goes, we only have like 27, 28 billion a year to spend, right? So the vast majority of tax money that's generated in Alberta is already going to healthcare. And again, if we reversed equalization, that would free up a lot of money. It's funny how the left never brings that up. If we just didn't have equalization, we could actually pay for a lot of this stuff, and not only that, probably have money left over. It's funny they never bring that up. And it's very simple. The reason they don't bring it up is that they want socialism, right? Like it's so obvious, it's not even funny. And the thing that I always bring up is that if they were actually honest about it, I would at least respect them for that, right? I'd rather disagree with someone and them be honest with me than disagree with someone and them clearly lying to me, or at the very least so ignorant that they can't debate in good faith, right? So the other thing I wanted to bring up here is another thing that's a very big myth, especially amongst Canadians, is that they think that the US is a privatized system when in reality, according to the taxpayerpolicycenter.org here, the federal government spent nearly $1.2 trillion a year on Medicaid and Medicare, right? So the idea that the states is a free market is absolutely insane. The states is simply an area that has a balance between the two. I believe about half of every dollar spent on healthcare in the states is private sector and half is about government. So the idea, like I said, the idea that the states is a complete free market is absolutely insane. What these people don't tell you is that it's actually Canada that's the gross outlier, because Canada is the only area that doesn't have a private option, right? Canada, of the, I think it's 38 OECD countries, Canada is the only one, I believe, that doesn't have a private option, right? So it's actually Canada that is the gross outlier when it comes to healthcare, not the states. And again, it's like these people have literally never done any research whatsoever into when they go to form their worldviews. And this is something that really bothers me. So again, this is just a little rant I wanted to have today because I see all these people posting this stuff online, and it's like, you people know nothing. Like, you know nothing. And again, it really bothers me. And number one, here's the thing. The other thing they always bring up in Alberta too is that they want to make Alberta go private, right? But that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. They simply want Alberta to have a private option. And this is the thing that really the only argument you need to debunk the idea that public healthcare is better than private and public schools are better than private and everything, free market versus the government in every scenario, is that if the government provided services were so much better, which they always claim to, like they always maintain that, even though it doesn't back it up. If they're so much better, then they would be fine with the competition, right? Like if public schools were better than private schools or charter schools, all the public school teachers would love private schools and would love charter schools, because if public schools are better, then they would simply outcompete them and the private schools would go out of business, or at the very least they would become irrelevant. But they never do, they never say that because they know that they're better. Same thing goes for healthcare. They never bring that argument up because they know that the private system is better. And not only that, it's probably even better for most lower income people, right? Like the only people that suffer under a private healthcare system, it's not the poor. It's not the poor, because in a private system where there isn't overbearing regulations, which I think is one of the biggest problems when it comes to the states, is that it's not that the private system doesn't work, is that it's that there's way too many regulations and red tape. There should be way less red tape. Um, it's that the people who are incredibly unhealthy, the people that, cost the system, into the millions of dollars before it's all said and done, that put in like 10 times, the people that take out like 10x more than they put in, those are the people that lose out. But do you actually feel sorry for these people? Like, I don't feel sorry for someone who smokes a pack a day, is an alcoholic, is obese. Like, I don't feel so of most of those people, because some of them may genuinely, get unlucky, or were in a bad situation, but most of them consciously made those decisions knowing it was going to cost them at some point or another, right? And if you consciously make that decision, I think it is incredibly unfair to point guns at people. And again, that's the reality of the situation. Let's not tiptoe around that. To point guns at people who put in way more into the system than they take out, and say, pay for my health care, right? Like, it's absolutely insane to suggest that. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Make sure you check out those links in the description. Follow me on those other platforms. If you'd like to donate, you can do that as well. So like I say, check those out and make sure you hit that like and subscribe.